All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachakwadash. Double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone who rule very well, very beautifully. Double salutations be unto the Akim out here pushing this gospel in truth and in sincerity to the best of their ability, given to them by Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Peace, blessings, and salutations be unto the elect scattered abroad. May the election of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord willing, fall upon their houses. And man, we out here another week through the grace and mercy of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, and His only beloved begotten Son, Yahweh Shai, to continue to preach this gospel, this good news, you know, which a part of that good news, man, is the overturning, right, of this wicked and evil rulership, man, right, which we know, right, when we go into the scriptures, right. Matter of fact, we'll grab it, right. This is Job 9. In verse 24, it says, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judge thereof, if not, where and who is he? And we understand that the wicked, right, when you go into the scriptures, right, Malachi 1 and 4, we know that the wicked, right, is Esau Edom, right? Well, Esau Edom today would be the self-proclaimed so-called white man, right? He's the one that rules everything, right? When it comes to these major businesses, right? You're always seeing, you know, Esau being the general manager or the manager or regional manager or the CEO or COO or all these different higher up positions. They're all so-called white folks, right? As far as business owners, you know, and so on and so forth. They're all so-called white folks, man. You know, and then you go into, you know, again, those that run, you know, America, right? Those that run, you know, even like Vanguard, BlackRock, so on and so forth. The central banks, right? They're all ran by Esau Edom, the self-proclaimed so-called white man. So, hey, we understand that it's the Edomites, right? That are the wicked, right? The so-called white folks, they are the wicked that the Bible speaks of, man. Right? The Bible calls them what? The border of wickedness, right? They're in charge, you know? And they have done nothing, right, but forward and push wickedness in the earth, you know. Let's go ahead and grab that in Second Esdras 15 and verse 6 being the point, right? It says, for wickedness hath exceedingly polluted the whole earth, and their hurtful works are fulfilled, right? This wickedness is, you know, is at an all-time high, right? You got men trying to be women, women trying to be men, you know, the woman wearing the pants in the relationship, right? This is all wickedness, right? You got the scriptures say that folly is set in great dignity. You look at the mindset, right, and the actions of these people, right? It's all wickedness, man. You know, you got man laying with man, right? Woman laying with woman. You know, you got women that are, you know, it's being promoted that, you know, a woman could be, you know, could have multiple men, you know, at one time, you know, can be with multiple men at one time. You know, this is all wickedness. This is all abominable, right? This is not how, you know, this place is supposed to be ran, you know, and to add, you know, you know, insult to injury, right? Esau's fucking with the food system, man. Esau's, you know, and the brothers were bringing it out yesterday at camp, you know, that I think it was Norway, right? When they came over here, right, for the, you know, the World Cup, right, the soccer, right? When they came over here, they ultimately flew in 10,000 pounds of food. So that way their players don't have to eat the food here, you know? And that's ultimately, you know, brothers were saying, you know, that's ultimately how America ultimately gets, you know, its advantage, right? Is because those players will come over here, eat the food and get sick. Because the food over here in America, right, which we know, right, the food, you know, period, just in general across the world is defiled, but it's the worst over here in America, man. You know, I was doing a, you know, a lesson on it, you know, I want to say a couple of days ago, you know, that the food here in America is completely fake, right? There's no like nutrients, there's no, you know, minerals, vitamins, or whatever, you know, that's ultimately in this food. It's all fake. It's all GMO, right? Genetically modified, you know? So it's not going to benefit you. It's not going to heal your body, right? Like when you eat food, right, it's supposed to, you know, ultimately work with your body, right? You're supposed to get, you know, absorb the nutrients, absorb, the vitamins and so on and so forth that come from the fruit, the vegetables, right? The proteins and calcium and zinc and so on and so forth that come from the meats and so on and so forth, right? You're supposed to be able to absorb that, and it ultimately helps your body to heal itself. It helps your body to, to have energy. None of this food ultimately does that, right? This food ultimately breaks you down. It's full of chemicals, right? It's full of parasites and so on and so forth that ultimately destroy your body, man. So he's messing with the food system. He's messing with the air. He's putting chemicals and whatnot in the air, and you're breathing it. You got the mixed fabrics. So Esau is completely ruling in wickedness, man. Again, it doesn't just go or start or stop right at him. Again, the vibration that he's putting on the people, the mindset that he's got the people in. It's also what he's doing to the people, via the food, via the air, the water, right? You got something called reverse osmosis, right? He basically strips the water of the nutrients and puts in synthetic nutrients or synthetic electrolytes and whatnot, man. Right? So you're really just drinking dead water. That's wickedness, man. That's evil. He makes you pay for water. Right? Water is free. It's abundant in the earth. Just like food, right? You can go and I remember, back where I'm from, up northwestern area, right back in Oregon, right? I used to be able, when I was a kid, I used to walk down, something called the Springwater Corridor, right? It goes from the ocean, right, all the way to Mount Hood in Oregon, 300 something miles stretch long. But you can walk down that and grab, plums and blackberries, blueberries, strawberries, right? All the fruit. It's all naturally grown on that strip, man. All naturally grown, right? And you can get full off of that. Obviously, you don't want to eat too much, but nonetheless, right? It's all free. All this stuff, ultimately naturally grows, man. But see, Esau ultimately makes it to where you have to go and you have to buy it. Right, you have to go and you have to, spend money on things that are natural in the earth, right? Such as water, man. That's all wickedness. That's all evil, man. And this devil has to go down, man. I'll read this again, right? 2 Ezra 15 and verse 6. It says, "For wickedness hath exceedingly polluted the whole earth, and the hurtful works are fulfilled." Now let me jump to this in Sirach, right? Sirach 10, and recently, right, these precepts have been coming out a lot more because of who is in charge, right? It says Sirach 10 and 1. It says, "A wise judge will instruct his people, and the government of a prudent man is well ordered." And Esau is not that wise judge, man. Esau is not that prudent man, right? Esau is ultimately, that Esau ain't fucking bright at all, man. Really, he's just wicked. He's evil. It says, verse 2, "As for the judge of the people is himself, so are his officers, and what manner of the man of the ruler, what manner the man," Slaki, I'll read that again. Sirach 10 and 2. "As the judge of the people is himself, so are his officers, and what manner of man the ruler of the city is, such are all they that dwell therein." Right? So starting at the very, very top, right? If the top, the head guy, if he's wicked, right? And he don't go by a structured set of laws, right, that ultimately allow for things to run smoothly and allow things to run, righteously, right, good. Hey, well, guess what? That's just going to trickle down, right, from the head to the toe. This whole system is just is wicked. It's evil, and bros deal with that every single day, right? From being at the plantation, right, from having to go and deal with, certain court cases and this, that, and the third, right, whatever it may be. Bros have to go through this and deal with this shit every day. So we ultimately see it, man. These average people, they're blind to the fact they think that this is how this is supposed to be ran, but this is not how it's supposed to be, man. Again, the one who's in charge, the one who has been set over everything, right? He's running everything completely wrong, right? He's not forwarding the scriptures, right? The Bible, right, as his I guess instruction manual on how to rule, right? Which it is, right? It's an instruction manual, right, in righteousness, man. How to rule and how to operate in righteousness. And Esau doesn't use it, even though in his kingdom, right, it's the #1 produced and bought book. You know, but yet here he is. He's going completely contrary to the scriptures, contrary to the Bible. And you know, it ultimately makes sense because it wasn't given unto him. You know, it wasn't given to him to ultimately utilize the scriptures, man. It was given to us, right? The Israelites, the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, you know, as well as the Israelite foreigners, right? The Israelites in general, right? It was given to us. It wasn't given to every nation. It wasn't given, you know, to Esau, Edom, to use the scriptures to rule. And right, so at the current and present time, right, he's ruling in wickedness, man. Right, but we're seeing the downfall of this kingdom, this wicked and evil rulership, right, coming to an end. Right, when you go into and you do your research, you know, as far as you know these you know, these ancient rulerships, these ancient empires, right? The rule of these ancient empires are roughly, you know, 250 years, man. And we're coming up on the 250th birthday, right? July 4th is 250 years that America has been, you know, in charge, man. You know, 250 years from 1776 to 2026, man. That's 250 years that America's been in charge, right? It's been at the you know, at its, you know, its height. You know, but see again, right? All that is coming crashing down, man. Right? We're already starting to see it, man. You got what is that? America, you know, ultimately being what is it? Insolvent, right? On its debt, right? Meaning it can't pay its debt. You know, this place is ultimately going down, man. America, right? Babylon the Great is going down. You know, which means Esau, Edom is going down because see this right here, right? Ultimately represents, you know, Esau's, you know, power, right? America represents Esau's power, you know, America being on the top, ruling over all the rest of these nations, right? And Esau using America to do so, to push that, you know, that wine, that philosophy, you know, onto the rest of these nations, right? And allowing these nations to ultimately see him as being some type of righteous man or some type of God in the earth, you know. But now Yahweh Bashim El Shai is ultimately allowing for everybody to see who this devil is, man. You know, that he is the wicked, right? Let's go to that and we'll come back to this, right? This is First Thessalonians or Second Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 3. It says, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. And what is that day, right? That day is what? The deliverance of the elect, right? And the establishment of a righteous rulership, man. That day is not going to come except they're coming a fall away first, right? Which ultimately happened, right? We're ultimately, you know, going back to 70 AD, right? We ultimately departed from, you know, Yahweh Bashim El Shai, going into captivity, you know? And even now, right? We're in the result of us falling away, man. You know? Being put in captivity, man. Being at the bottom, you know? It says what? That day is not going to come except they're coming a falling away first, right? That happened, you know? And then what? That man of sin be revealed. And we're in the time where he's being revealed at an all-time high, right? You got the president, right? Ultimately being, you know, exposed for being, you know, a PDF file, man. You know, as well as many other, you know, senators, celebrities, governors, whatever it may be, right? They're all being exposed, right? And a lot of them are so-called white folks, man. Yes, you do have, you know, your Jakes in there, you know, you do have your Israelites, your so-called blacks and Hispanics and Native Americans, right? They're in there as well, right? But it's predominantly Esau Edom because that's who he is. That's his culture, right? That's what he does, man, right? You go back to, you know, the Talmud, right? Which is Esau's, you know, Bible, if you will, right? The small hats and whatnot, the 1948ers, right? That's their Bible. And when you read it, it's completely the opposite of the Bible, man. And this is what they go by. This is what their, you know, their standard and way of life. And again, it's wickedness, man. It's evil, right? And again, that's what's being forwarded in the earth. That's what's being, you know, pushed, right? It says, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And see Esau Edom, right? He's so proud, you know, that you had what is it? Yuval Noah Harari, right? One of the head of the World Economic Forum, right? Which most of the people don't even know about the World Economic Forum, man. Right? These are unelected, you know, world government officials, man. Unelected world government officials. These are the people that are ultimately making the decisions, right? And how the world, right, should ultimately operate, man. But no, nonetheless, right? His name is Yuval Noah Harari, man. right? And he ultimately, which he's a small hat, right? One of those little JOOs, man. You know, the small caps, big noses, man. You know, but nonetheless, right? He made a statement that said that God is dead, right? We're ultimately just trying to find out how to hide the body, right? That's a fucking proud ass statement. You had Elon Musk saying that the things that they're doing when it comes to this technology, right, are Jesus level miracles, man. That's fucking proud, man. That's blasphemous, you know, statements, man. You know, which we know the Messiah's name is not Jesus, right? Jesus, the letter J didn't come into, you know, into mainstream until, you know, around the early 1600s, man. Right? Created by a so-called white man, a Greek man named Gian Giorgino Trissino, you know, in around, you know, 1524. But again, didn't even come into, you know, mainstream until, you know, around the early 1600s. So prior to that, right, what was his name, man? You know, his name was Yahweh Shai, right, in the Paleo Ancient Hebrew. But nonetheless, right, that's blasphemous talk, man, against Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. You know, that's how these devils operate, right? They're so proud, you know, that to talk against Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai like that, man. You know, it says, and we'll drop down. It says, verse 7, it says, for the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth will let until he be taken out the way. And so we go back to Daniel 2 and 21, right? The Lord setteth up kings and removeth kings, man. And the Lord ultimately allowed for this devil to be set up, you know, allowed for him to set up and is allowing for this devil to rule, man, you know. And just as he did, you know, with Pharaoh, right? Going back to, you know, ancient Egypt, the Lord, you know, he allowed him to rule, right? And hardened his heart, right? Made him proud, you know, to come up against, you know, the Israelites and Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. And then what? The Lord ultimately brought him down, man. And so we're seeing that ultimately happen today, right? Ecclesiastes 1 and 9. There's no new thing under the sun, man. We're in modern day Egypt today, you know. The Lord said what? That Babylon the Great, right? Spiritually Sodom and Egypt, man. Sodom because of all the Moism, right? The sodomy, right? That ultimately takes place here. And we understand that America is the epicenter of wickedness, right, in the earth, right? And they you know, you have these pride events and so on and so forth, and where they ultimately mislabel, right, and blaspheme, you know, the with the rainbow, you know, and make it out to be something it's not. You know, that was ultimately a sign that the Lord ultimately would not, you know, flood the earth again by water, you know. But yet here they are using it as a symbol, right, for sodomy, man, you know, and Moism and shit, you know. The Lord allowing this devil to be in power, you know. And again, he's ruling in wickedness, man. He's not ruling how he should be, right? So again, this is why we see America ultimately being, you know, more and more nations are not dealing in the dollar, right? America just lost this fucking this so-called peace deal or treaty or whatnot with Iran, right? This whole thing with Iran, America ultimately was losing, right? America and Israel were getting their ass whipped by Iran, right? When it comes to, you know, bombs being fired up, Iran is creating these cheap ass fucking drones, sending them and fucking whooping America's ass and Israel's ass, you know. America and Israel use $1 million, you know, single missiles, one missile being millions of dollars, right? And using that, wasting money, you're wasting their stocks, right? This is why Trump's saying that a lot of these companies, right, are going to have to start ramping up their weaponry and ammo production, you know, because they're losing, you know. America isn't that top nation that it was, you know, many years ago, man. America is now losing, right? America is this whole agreement that went through, or that so-called went through, but immediately got, you know, canceled. America was losing in that whole agreement, right? America had to, you know, limit, right, the military that they had in that area. They had to open up, you know, the Iranian ports. They had to release $300 billion or $300 million worth of assets to Iran. You know, they had to ultimately open up that blockade. You know, basically give Iran everything that they want. And what would Iran do? Right? They get to keep their uranium in their own land. Right? When America was trying to take it, they get to keep their uranium. They just have to dilute it. And they have to remove open up the Strait of Hormuz. So it's really a lose situation for America and a win situation for Iran. Again, showing you that America doesn't have that power. Esau doesn't have that power anymore, man. To continue to try to, force his way on the people, and the Lord Yahweh Shemel Shai is going to take this devil out the way, man. It says, let's read verse 8. It says, then shall that wicked be revealed, right? Esau being revealed, right? Which is the reason why, because you got Iran also making those videos, those Lego movie videos where you can find them on Instagram, right? Talking mad shit about Esau, man. Bringing up the Epstein files and they're even talking about slavery in there, in these little Lego videos, man. Again, it's exposing Esau, It says, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth. And how is, who's the spirit, who's the mouthpiece of the Lord? That's the prophets, right? The true prophets, man. Not these, these pagan Christians, right? These Catholics, not these these JOOs. No, man. None of them. They're all false prophets. They're all false teachers, man. Right? The true prophets of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, and his only beloved begotten Son, right, are here, on the scene today, right? Starting with the elder apostles of Great Millstone on down, right, to the GMS, the Great Millstone affiliates, right, that preach the same gospel, the same truth, man. Those are the true prophets, man, and we're here, right, revealing this damn devil, and that's what it means, being consumed through the spirit of the Lord's mouth, man, right? It says, and shall destroy with the brightness of its coming. And see, that's what's next, right? We're seeing this devil being brought down, right? Which, again, there's order and steps to it. There's prophecy that has to unfold, right? And we understand that, right? But we're starting to see his decline, right? And I always like to make that analogy, right? When somebody's climbing up a mountain, right? It's hard, it's tough, right? But once you get there, and the only way that you can go is what? Down. Esau done hit his peak. Right, and now he's going down, right? Let's go to that, and what is that, Job 14 and verse 5. It says, seeing his days are determined, and this is speaking of the wicked, right, who we're talking about, Esau, Edom, right? It says, seeing his days are determined, the number of his months are with thee, thou hast appointed his bounds that he cannot pass. So it's not like, once you reach the top of a mountain, it's not like you can go higher. You've already reached that limit. You've already reached the height, of your ability. Right. And now, again, all you can do is go down. Right. And this is what the Lord is ultimately doing to this devil. He reached his limit, and now he hit that wall. And now the only thing he can do is go back or go down, man. And this is what he sees. Right. This is why he's ultimately trying to speed things up. He's pushing out, and he's making the RFID microchip, which is the mark of the beast. He's making it mainstream now. Right. China just ultimately releasing their brain chip called Neo. Right? They released it to the mainstream, beating Elon Musk Neuralink right to the punch, basically, man. Showing you that everything is moving fast, right? They're already starting to, regulate, right? The stable coin, they're starting to dish it out, right? And regulate I'm sorry, you said what? Regulate the stable coin, which is ultimately going to be that digital currency that's going to be attached to that device, man. So Esau's speeding things up, man, as we read in Revelations 12 and 12. Let's grab that real quick. Revelations chapter 12, verse 12. It says, therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. He knows he got a short time, man. He knows that when the prophets show up and the prophets get on scene, and what happens, right? And that whoever's in rulership, whoever's in power, they ultimately come to a screeching halt, right? The Lord brings them down, right? The prophets are set up to do what, right? Let's grab that. Jeremiah 28 and verse 8. It says, the prophets that have been before me and before thee of old prophesied against many countries and against great kingdoms, right? Which we're doing now, right? Babylon the Great. Right? America, right? Prophesying against Babylon the Great, man. Prophesying against Esau, Edom, and his rulership, right? It says, of war and of evil and of pestilence, man. And we're in a time of war, right? We read that in Ecclesiastes 3:1, right? There's a time, a season, and a purpose to everything under the heavens, man. Right? Dropping down to verse 8, it tells you a time of love, a time of hate, a time of war, and a time of peace. And we're not in a time of peace, man. That's why all these different peace deals that America ultimately tries to make with Iran, or little ceasefires that ultimately try to be established between Israel and Iran, right? They always get broken by either Israel or America, man. They always are getting broken because, again, we're not in the time of peace. We're in the time of war. Hence the reason why and we've brought this out many times, right? Why they continue, why they change the name of the Secretary of Defense to the Secretary of War, or the Department of Defense, right, to the Department of War, right? They changed the name, man, because we're in the time of war, and it's only going to continue to, get worse. It's only going to continue to boil over, man. Because of the wickedness, right, that has been forwarded and pushed in the earth by Esau, by America, right? The Lord's finna destroy this place, man. The Lord is finna pull Esau Edom out of the ruler, out of the position of power, and destroy Esau Edom's cash cow and his power, which is America. Let's go back to Sirach, the 10th chapter. Sirach 10 in verse 3, it says, an unwise king destroyed his people. And see, this is what's happening, right? Esau is completely destroying these people via, again, the food system, the water, the education system, right? This shit right here, the education system, it doesn't teach you history, right? It teaches you so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans that your history, your true history starts at slavery and forward, right? You're from slavery to now, but it doesn't teach you anything about prior to that. Right, it doesn't teach you about the West Africa being formerly called Judah, the kingdom of Judah, right, and that there was Israelites that were ultimately enslaved, Israelites, right, that were enslaved, by the Ishmaelites, the Hamites, right, the Hamites being the so-called Africans, right, the Ishmaelites being the so-called Middle Eastern, the Arabs, and then the Edomites, man, and then brought over here on slave ships, man. They don't teach you prior to that, right? They don't teach you 70 AD. You had Israelites that fled, to the western and northern parts of Africa. They don't teach you all that, man, right? But that history is in the scriptures. That history is in the Bible, man. The true prophets are not only there to warn you, right, and to tell you of the things that are to come, but they're also historians, man. Elder Apostle Har, he made a beautiful statement. He said it, for years now. He said, in order to understand the mystery, you have to know the history. You got to go into the Bible, man. You got to go into the secular history and ultimately, get that information, matching it up with the Bible, right? Because the Bible mentions, the Greeks, the Babylonians, right? The Medo-Persians, right? The Assyrians, right? The Greeks and the Romans, man. And you got to go into the history of those rulerships, right? And who were the people that were enslaved in every one of those kingdoms, man, which were the Israelites, man. And today we understand, again, we're still in captivity, right? Baruch 3:8, we are yet this day in our captivity. Under who? Under Esau Edom, right? The one who is, again, in power and the one who is currently destroying this world, man. It says, Sirach 10:3, it says, an unwise king destroyeth his people, but through the prudence of them which are in authority, the city shall be inhabited. And here's verse 4. It says, the power of the earth is in the hand of the Lord. Again, right? The Lord governeth the world with the palm of his hand. We read that in Sirach, the 18th chapter, right? The Lord is in control of everything, man. Right? You have these pagan Christians that tell you that there's such thing as free will. There's no such thing as free will, man. Romans 9:19, whoever resisted the will of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Bashmiel Shah, nobody, right? People will sit there and tell you that God is all-knowing, right? God is almighty, right? That if he's all-knowing, right, then he knows exactly what you're going to do because he's the one that ultimately written it for you to do it. So then how is that free will, right? These people are fucking, they're hypocrites. They don't even understand what they're talking about, man. It says, and in due time, he will set over it one that is profitable. And that's talking about Yahweh Shai, man. Yahweh Shai, right? The Heavenly Father, the Messiah, right? The Heavenly Father's only beloved begotten Son, Yahweh Shai, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. Hey, when he comes, right, what is he going to do? Right? He's going to remove this devil out of the power seat, man. Let's go ahead and grab that. This is, what is that? 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 24, right? It says, then come at the end of what? The end of this current rulership, right? Then come at the end when he shall have delivered up the kingdom to the Most High, even the Father, when he shall have put down all rule and all authority and power, right? And you read that in Revelation, the 19th chapter, right? It tells you that he's going to do what, right? He's going to ultimately crack the sky with that army being on that fathership, you know, the so-called UFO, the so-called UAP, right? Which are being shown and exposed more and more, right? Esau has to release all the UFO files and so on and so forth, because at this point, it's like people are seeing them, you know, in unprecedented numbers, man. You know, people are asking questions. So he's got to release them and be like, oh, yeah, we knew they were here. If you knew, then why the fuck you ain't tell nobody? Because you can't hide it, man. Esau was trying to hide it for so long. But see, man, Yahweh Bashim El Shai is starting to show himself, man. You know, and there's nothing he can do about it. That's why he's panicking, right? He knows he has but a short time, right? Because Yahweh Shai is right around the corner, man. Yahweh Shai is coming is right around the corner, right? Which he knows when the Yahweh Shai comes, that's it. He's done for, man. Right? Because when Yahweh Shai comes, matter of fact, let's grab that. Revelations 19 and verse 11, it says that I saw heaven open, right? This is a vision, right? That John the Revelator, right, ultimately had seen when he was ultimately in the Isle of Patmos, man, being in prison, right? The Lord gave him this vision. It says, and I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. Now, white symbolic for pure, and horse being symbolic for power. So he's coming in pure power, right? It says, and I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called faithful and true, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war, right? Right? So he's going to ultimately, what is he going to do, right? You read that in Second Ezra, the 13th chapter, right? That Yahweh Shai, when he comes, again, he's going to be on that fathership, right? Ezra, when the Lord gave him that vision, he saw that, right? He saw the same vision, right? And ultimately was what? Yahweh Shai coming on a so-called UFO so big, right, that Ezra couldn't even see the ends of it. Right? That's how big it was, man. He said he flew upon a mountain, right? So big that he couldn't see the end. That's the so-called UFO, right? Which we know is the chariot. It's called the chariot, right? According to the Bible, it's called the chariot, right? That's the chariot that Yahweh Shai is going to be coming on, man. And again, he's coming with an army as well, right? When a king ultimately travels, you're watching all these different movies, right? These different TV shows, you know, and you look and you read in ancient history, right? All these kings, wherever they went, they always traveled with the military with them, man. Right? A small band of their best fighters, you know? They always travel with an army. And this is Yahweh Shai is coming with the greatest army, man. The angels in chariots as well, right? In verse 12, it says, his eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. And he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. And those many crowns is going into all these different kings and rulers that you see now. Hey, when Yahweh Shai comes, he's going to take all that power and authority that these rulers have, right? These presidents and so-called kings, right? You got so-called King Charles, right? You got DJT, right? Donald Trump, right? All that power that they have, and especially the elites, right? Because they ultimately operate in the background. None of these nations move, right? Unless the elites want them to, man. You know? So all that power, he's going to consecrate unto himself, man. And that's what it means by him having many crowns, right? He's not literally going to wear many crowns and they're going to be floating little mini crowns around his head, which if the Lord chose to do that, he very well could, right? But that's not what it's talking about, you know? It says, verse 13, it says, and he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of the Most High. And we know that Yahweh Shai, the Messiah, right, was ultimately the Word made flesh. Right, so speaking about the Messiah, the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, his only beloved begotten Son, you know. And it says what? A vesture dipped in blood. When you read in Isaiah the 63rd chapter, right, starting at the first verse, it talks about when he comes, he's going to do what? He's going to make war, and guess what? It's going to be bloodshed, man. You know, it's going to be straight up bloodshed. Matter of fact, let's go there. We'll come back to Revelations 19, Isaiah 63. In verse 1, it says, who is this that cometh from Edom with dyed garments from Basra? Right? It says that this that is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength. I that speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Right? He's coming in that power, right? That fathership, that white horse, that pure power, right? It says, wherefore art thou red in thine apparel, and thy garments like him that treadeth in the wine fat? I have trod in the winepress alone, and of the people there was none with me. For I will tread them in mine anger and trample them in my fury, and their blood, right, shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my raiment. So this is what it's talking about, right? You know, so when he comes, it's going to be complete and utter bloodshed, man. You know, Yahweh Shai, man, again, along with the angels, but mainly Yahweh Shai is going to be tearing these people up, man. He's going to be making war. And war, we know war, right, is with rolled garments and blood, you know, and with loud noise, as the scriptures say, man. So, and when Yahweh Shai comes, it's going to be a massacre, right? It's going to be a one-sided war. Yahweh Shai and the angels going to win, you know? Yahweh Shai said what? Verse 4, it says, for the day of vengeance is in mine heart, and the year of my redeemed is come. You know, it says, and I looked and there was none to help, and I wondered that there was none to uphold. Therefore mine arm brought salvation unto me, and my fury had upheld me. And I will tread down the people in my anger, and will make them drunk in my fury, and I will bring down their strength to the earth. Right? Going back to Revelations 19. Continue on. I'll read verse 13 again. Revelations 19-13. It says that he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of the Most High. Again, talking about Yahweh Shai. It says, and the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. So again, right, he coming with that army, right? What is that? The book of, what is that? Jude 1 and right here, 1 and 14, right? Enoch, right? Ultimately, he prophesied of Yahweh Shai's coming, right? That's in the Old Testament, right? And which is, in Genesis, right? Where you find, where Enoch is mentioned, right? Jude 1 and verse 14, it says, Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Right? So, he prophesied of Yahweh Shai's coming, right? That judgment that Yahweh Shai was going to bring, right? That war that Yahweh Shai was ultimately going to wage against these nations, man, starting with Esau, Edom on down, Again, when Yahweh Shai comes, man, it's not going to be a pretty sight for you devils, man. Revelations 19 and continuing on in verse 15, it says, and out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, and with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and the wrath of the almighty power. Right? So, when he comes, it's going to be, again, bloodshed, man. And then what he's going to do, he's going to set up a righteous rulership. Starting with Yahweh Shai, there's going to be a righteous rulership that is going to be established in the earth, right? That wicked rulership that we, are currently in, right? That's going to be removed, right? You read that in Second Esdras. Matter of fact, we'll go to it as well, right? This is Second Esdras, the 4th chapter, and the 28th verse. It says, but as concerning the things whereof thou ask me, I will tell thee. For the evil is sown, and we've been speaking about that, right? All the evil that Esau is sown in the earth, fucking with the food system, fucking with the air, fucking with the water, the education system, the vibration and mindset that he's pushed on the people. He's turned everything completely upside down, as the Bible speaks, as the Bible says, man. It says, but the destruction thereof is not yet come, right? This place hasn't been destroyed yet, but it will come, right? It says it has not yet come, right? We know that it's coming, right? Via the scriptures, via prophecy, right? That is unfolding. It says, if therefore that which is sown be not turned upside down, and if the place where the evil is sown pass not away, then cannot it come that is sown with good. And we understand that this place is being torn down now. And we understand that the Lord made a promise to establish a righteous rulership, right? In Isaiah the 55th chapter, it says the words of Yahweh Bashim El Shai shall not go out void, but they shall accomplish whereto he had sent it, man. So the Lord ultimately has spoken about the kingdom, a righteous rulership being established. And you best believe that's going to happen, man. And again, it's going to start with Yahweh Shai, right? It talks about a government being upon his shoulders. Let me grab that real quick, right? Isaiah 9 and verse 6, it says, for unto us a child is born, and unto us a son is given, right? And the government shall be upon his shoulder. It's talking about Yahweh Shai, right? Who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, right? His true name is Yahweh Shai, right? It says, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty Power, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace, man, right? It says, and of the increase of his government and peace shall there be no end upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth, even forevermore. The zeal of the Lord Yahweh Bashim El Shai of hosts will perform this, right? The Lord saying that he's going to perform, Yahweh Shai being set up, right? And a righteous rulership being established, starting with Yahweh Shai, right? That's what it's talking about, right? That those many crowns that are found upon his head, when he comes down, he's removing all the wicked out of power, right? And a righteous rulership is going to be established, man. And we're going to continue to preach this over and over and over again because, hey, guess what, man? It's prophecy. This is prophecy, and those who are truly of Yahweh Shai, right, are going to continue to prophesy. Revelations 19 and 10. The testimony of Yahweh Shai being the spirit of prophecy, man. We're going to continue to prophesy, man. Because we want this place to go down, man. We don't want, scriptures talk about, in Lot, we're in the same spirit, man. Right? What is that? 2 Peter 2 and 7, right? It says, and delivered just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked, right? When you go into that word conversation, it goes into conduct, not just the words that are being spoken, that we hear people speak, but also their actions, man. Right? People, doing drugs, being moles, right? Being PDF files, right? And they're trying to ultimately make it to where it's a mental disorder rather than a wicked act that that is punishable. Oh, these people just need therapy or this. And no, man, that shit's nasty as fuck for a grown ass man, right? Because they have videos, straight up videos of Donald Trump with Epstein in a room full of grown ass men, and you have the whole bunch. A shit ton of these little ass girls, probably ages 3 to 5 or 4 to 6, right? In these dresses, dancing around. They look scared, in a room full of grown ass men, and these men are smiling. That shit's disgusting. Like, you're a fucking man. First and foremost, you're rich. You can really have any woman you want because women are all about money. But here you are going after a little ass fucking girl that hasn't even had her, her flower yet, man. Which is going into her, her monthly visit. You're going into these little ass children, man. That shit's disgusting. But see, again, right? That's what's promoted. That's what's forwarded in this world, man. And this is why these devils gotta fucking go, man. This fucking place is evil. This place is wickedness. And see, a lot of these people will sit there and say, oh no, you'll ask them, you'll be like, oh, hey, do you think that's right? Oh no, that's not right. That's not this. Okay, well, why are you not standing up against it? Why are you not saying nothing? You got so many people outside of America that are looking at Americans and being like, you people are fucking stupid. Because I think it was over there in, I think it was Armenia, if I'm not mistaken. Armenia, you had Jared Kushner basically trying to establish another Epstein Island out there. And you know what they did? You know what the people did? They're rioting, burning shit down, right? That building that they're ultimately trying to use to establish something, I guess their headquarters in there. Hey, they're tearing it up. See, those people over there, they're actually moving on this shit. But these American people, they're fucking ignorant, man. These people in America are fucking ignorant. Oh, that it don't affect me. It don't. Okay, well, that doesn't mean anything. As a collective, You people are allowing this shit to happen. If you're not against the problem, then guess what? You're a part of the problem, man. And this is why most of these people in the world, they got to perish, man. The Lord said what? Most of these people are what? They're born in vain. You know? The only purpose for most of these people out here is to be destroyed, man. Right along with the wicked. Right along with these motherfuckers, man. And again, that goes back to what? That being vexed, right? With the filthy conversation of the wicked, man. 2 Peter 2:9 said, for that righteous man dwelling among them in seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds, man. You know, you're watching people with these, what they call it, a mukbang or whatever. These people are eating fucking live animals and eating fucking, you know, shrimp, crab, lobster, pork, getting, you know, being unhealthy as shit. You know, that shit's vexing. It's like you're, and a lot of people will tell you, like, you'll sit there and tell them, nah, I don't eat shrimp. You know, I told people, you know, many people that I don't eat shrimp. They'll be like, why? I just don't eat shrimp. It don't taste good to me. You know, I just kind of, you know, keeping it simple. They'll be like, why? Because it's a cockroach of the sea. Motherfucker, you know that shit? And you still gonna eat it? I said, motherfucker, you gonna eat a cockroach? No. So then why are you eating the shrimp? Just because it don't look like no damn cockroach don't mean that it don't have the same it don't have the same purpose as a cockroach, to clean up waste, to clean up garbage, right? Just like a crab, right? Just like plankton, just like krill, just like, you know, all these, they're filters, man. They filter out the bad, just like clams, what is that? Oysters, you know, they clean out the water. They clean out, they're like a filter system, man. Y'all ever had fish? Like, you know, like actual, you know, little fish, like in your home or whatnot, and you have that water pump, you know, and you have to change out the filter every once in a while because that shit will get nasty, it'll get dirty. Go into your fish tank and grab that filter, throw that shit on the grill, and then eat that shit, man. You ain't gonna fucking do it. You ain't gonna do it, man. But that's what you eating, right? That shit is vexing. Right. And this is why we're continuing to prophesy against this place, man. Prophesy the downfall of this place because we want this place to go, man. You know, people will come up and tell us, hey, well, why? Or if you don't like America, why are you here? We don't like the state of the world wherever we go. We don't like who's in charge. Whether we go all the way to Argentina, whether we go to Antarctica, whether we go all the way to Norway, Sweden, Finland, we can go all the way to, you know, the fucking least inhabited place of Russia. Guess what? There's still going to be corruptness. There's still going to be wickedness because of who is in charge. That shit has spread and taken over the whole entire world. We want a new government to be established, and that's going to happen. You know, starting with Yahweh Shai on down, man. You know, let's go to this. It's what is that? 2 Peter 3 and verse 11. It says, seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of person are ye to be in all holy conversation and godliness, right? Where's your mindset at, man? Because we understand that this place is going down, right? We understand that this place is going to be destroyed, right? So we're ultimately in the right mindset, wanting to see this place go down, wanting to see righteousness be established. Where's your mindset at, man? Right? What are you thinking about? Are you thinking about, oh, you know, let me just chill. Like, I'll worry about, you know, the Bible and everything like that. I'll worry about that later. You know, eventually you're going to have to deal with it because you got more and more people that are buying books, buying Bibles. More and more people are buying apocryphas. More and more people are starting to ask questions. More and more people are starting to look for answers because, hey, everything that we've been telling y'all, starting with the elder apostles, the great millstone on down, hey, all of it's happening. There was a point in time, you know, with the elder apostles and the elder bishops, the elders, they were speaking about World War III far, you know, far longer than, you know, before I even came in the truth, they were speaking about it, you know. But while I was in the truth, when I first came in 2018 until now, I was able to experience, right, people saying that World War III wasn't going to happen. And then what? Now it's like nobody's saying World War III isn't going to happen. World War III, everybody's talking about it happening, man, because that's the time that we're in. We're in the time of the last two major prophecies, right, which is Revelations 13 and verse 16, which is a mandatory implementation of the RFID microchip, man. You know, again, China made that microchip mandatory, or not mandatory, but mainstream, you know, and most of these people are going to get it, man. when Esau starts to say, hey, you can't feed your kids, you can't have, you know, go out and participate in society, you can't go have fun, you know, you can't go to the gym, you can't go to no family function, you know, unless you have that chip. Hey, guess what? Most of these people are going to take it, man. Most of these people, when presented with that, I guess that I don't want to say opportunity, you know, but for lack of, you know, a better word, right? It's escaping me, you know, position, right? Being put in that position, you're going to take it, you know, but we're not going to take that, man. Right? Lord will be part of the elect. We're not going to take it, you know, because we know what's coming and we understand that there's judgment for those who do take it, right? Destruction, Revelations, the 14th chapter, you know, and ultimately, really, you taking it is you ultimately wanting this devil, right, to continue to reign, right? You want him to continue to have power and influence over your life, man. You know, and look at the state of our people, man. Look at the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, right? We're fucking down bad. We're the poor and the needy that the Bible speaks of, man. We're the lowest on the totem pole of all the nations, when in reality, according to the Lord, and we're above all the rest of the nations, man. We're the chosen nation of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, and His only beloved begotten Son, Yahweh Shai. You know, so why wouldn't you want to embrace that? Right? There's a reason why we're in this position, is because we didn't want to do what we were supposed to do. Right? As a people, we were given the law, statutes, commandments. You read that in Psalms 149. Right? Right? Matter of fact, let me grab that, man. I'm speaking on it. This is Psalms 149. It's kind of, you know, oh, it's like in 147. Psalms 147, Salakia, verses 19. It says, He showeth His word unto Jacob, His statutes and His commandments unto Israel. Right? He hath not dealt so with any nation. And as for His judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua. So the Lord's only dealing with the nation of Israel, man. You know, so we're telling you Israelites, right, that you're a slave to this devil, man. This is not, this system and how it's made and how it's set up is not for us. This is why we keep losing, right? This is why we keep being on the bottom. This is why nothing that we do is going to get us out of this position, right? Except for what? Trusting and believing in Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, right? You go into Deuteronomy 28th chapter, the 68th verse, it says, and no man shall buy you, right? When you go into that word buy, it means to redeem, right? No man is going to be able to redeem us out of this position, right? MLK couldn't do it. Malcolm X couldn't do it. Nat Turner couldn't do it. You know, Jesse Jackson couldn't do it. You know, nobody's going to be able to pull us out of this situation, man. Only Yahweh Shai can do it, man. You know, only Yahweh Shai, who shed his blood for the nation of Israel, you know, starting with the elect, is going to be able to do it, man. You know, so it's you returning to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua is how you're going to ultimately what? Receive that mercy and be a part of that rulership, man. You know, eventually all Israel is going to be, you know, righteous. We're going to be ruling over the heathens, but hey, you want to be on that first go around, man, right? And see the establishment of that righteous government, man, right? Which is what we want, right? Which is why we're out here on the highways and byways, man, the highways and the hedges, you know, making video epistles throughout the week, right? Pushing out this truth, this gospel, right? So that the elect of the nation of Israel can hear this word, right? And ultimately turn to the Lord, you know? Let's go back, right? At 2 Peter 3 and verse 12, it says, looking for and hasting unto the coming of the day of the Most High, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for a new heavens and a new earth wherein dwelleth righteousness. Because again, right, that government that's going to be established upon the shoulders of Yahweh Shai is going to be a righteous government, a righteous rulership. It's not going to be like what you see here, man. You know, where you know you can ultimately go to your job You know, and speaking of, experience, but you go to a job and you get hurt on the job, and the job wants to fire you, so they ain't got to fucking, like, what's the point of you getting a workers' comp anyways, man? What's the point of you having that if you're not going to use it? But you look at the employee that was hurt and you want to just get rid of him, so you ain't got to spend the money. You know, you ain't got to pay them for being injured on the job. That's the whole point of that insurance. That shit's wicked as hell, man. And brothers be going through that shit. Brothers be dealing with that shit, you know? And we have to deal with it. What does the scripture say, right? It says the poor man is wronged, right? And he has to entreat, right? Sirach the 13th chapter, meaning, hey, we get wrong, but yet we have to sit there and beg and plead and, for mercy, work for mercy, right? This shouldn't be like that, man. That's wickedness, man. But see, these people, they're so okay with that. Oh, well, that's all I know. Okay, and? Well, guess what? Get to know something else, man. The way it's supposed to be, right? Because this right here, this is not the end all be all for us, man. You know? This right here is just a small time in history, a small time in all existence, man, of this and what we got to deal with, man. This shit ain't gonna last too much longer, man. Right? When Yahushua comes, man, all this stuff we're dealing with it's gonna be no more, man. You know? Let's go to that Revelations. What is that? 21. And I'll start at verse 1, right? It says, and I saw and knew this again, going back to John the Revelator, that vision that he had seen, right? He's seeing this vision, right? Of after Yahushua comes, right? There's going to be a crowning ceremony. When Yahushua comes, he's going to do what? He's going to destroy the armies of these nations, consecrate that power unto himself, divvy out that power unto, the 144,000, the true prophets would be the governing body, right, of the kingdom to come, and then to the rest of the elect, And then what's going to happen? There's going to be, again, that crowning ceremony. And then what's going to happen? The elect are going to come down, right, and establish righteousness on the earth, man. Revelations 21 verse 1, it says, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth. New is not it's not talking about an actual new world, a new planet. No, it's talking about, like, you go into this word, it goes back to what? To renew, right? To mean to bring back, to reestablish, The world, hey, this earth, it was not meant to be bare and naked and just destroyed. It wasn't supposed to be like this, man. The whole earth was supposed to be like a Garden of Eden, man. Flourishing, Usually when things ultimately, get weak and malnourished and whatnot, they become smaller. Hey, the earth might even get bigger. We don't necessarily know, man. It's why you have all these fault lines and stuff like that. They're crinkling and squishing together. Everything's kind of just compressing. But soon the Lord is ultimately gonna breathe life back into it, man. When you breathe, when you're like, it got no air, your lungs are small. When you breathe, you got that life back into you. Yeah, your lungs get bigger, man. Hey, so you best believe the whole entire planet is gonna be on a whole new. It's gonna be completely different, man. Completely freaking different. It says, and I saw a new heaven and new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. Right, talking about the condition and how it's being ran. Right, that's the old way. Right, it's going to be completely new. Right, verse 2. It says, and I saw John, and John saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from the Most High out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And this again is talking about the nation of Israel, right, which is a people before it was a place. Right? You read that in what is that? Jeremiah 6:2. It tells you that Israel is likened unto a comely and delicate woman. It also tells you in Isaiah, Isaiah 54 and verse 5, that Israel is likened unto a bride, the wife of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. So it's ultimately speaking about the nation of Israel, right? Starting with the elect, right? Being that bride, right? Verse 3. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of the Most High is with men, and he shall dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and the Most High himself shall be with them and be their power, right? And the Most High shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, Neither shall be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Right? All of those things, that pain, that sorrow, right? All that's going to be done away with, man. And we're not going to have to deal with that shit no more. We're not going to have to be in pain no more. You know? We're going to be living forever. Wait, what does the scriptures also say? Right? In 2nd Esdras, the 8th chapter, in the 52nd verse, right? It says, for unto you is paradise open. Paradise, man. Matter of fact, let's see if we can grab that word paradise. Paradise. Right? Paradise. It says the Garden of Eden. Right? Paradise. Right? It says the abode of the blessed. Right? It says the Garden of Eden. The place of extreme beauty, blissful, state-like, or comparable to paradise. You know, everything's going to be perfect, right? The way it's supposed to be, right? The trees are going to look how they're supposed to be. The animals are going to be looking how they're supposed to be. You know, the air is going to be pure. There's not going to be no pollutants. You're not going to have fucking jets and airplanes and tanks and all these different vehicles roaming around spreading all this fucking, you know, carbon dioxide and whatnot. None of that shit's going to happen, man. That shit's going to be gone. You know? So like, it says, for unto you, 2nd Esdras 8:52, for unto you is paradise opened. The tree of life is planted. Meaning we're going to live forever, man. We're going to be righteous, right? A righteous kingdom. Right? And we know that, and what is that? Wisdom of Solomon 1:15, that righteousness is immortality. So we're going to be immortal, right? We're not going to have these actual fleshly bodies you see right here that can get cut, you know, that can ultimately age and die. We're going to be immortal. We're not going to age, you know, we're going to be in our peak forever, right? Of course, we're going to, you know, we have kids and our kids are going to get, you know, they're going to grow and they're going to, you know, get to that peak, but once they hit that peak, they're going to be at their peak forever. They'll never, you know, go past the peak. Their bodies will never age. Their organs will never, you know, start to grow old. You know, we'll have these new bodies, man. These celestial bodies. We're not going to have these fleshly, carnal bodies that we see and that we have now. Everything's going to be completely different, right? It says, for unto you is paradise open. The tree of life is planted. The time to come is prepared. Plenteousness is made ready. A city is built. They're talking about the kingdom. And rest is allowed. Yea, perfect goodness and wisdom. Right? Rest. Right? We don't have no fucking rest here as a people. Right? We got no rest here as a people, man. You know? We constantly, with scriptures talk about that. We have to ultimately get our bread by the sweat of our brow. Right? We have to work our asses off, injured or not, in order to make ends meet. And we ain't talking about just making money to, you know, so we can do what we want. No, we're talking about ends meet. Like barely making it by skin of the teeth, you know, the skin of our teeth, man. You know? And if you don't, hey, you're screwed. You don't have a house, you don't have a car, and you can die out here, especially out in Arizona, man. Because it gets super hot out here. We're already reaching what 110? I think it was last week or the week before, it was like 111. You know, I think, yeah, it was last week on like Monday or Tuesday. It was like 111. It was 111, 110 degrees. We're averaging about 103, 105 right now. You know? This shit's hot. You can die out here in Arizona if you don't have a car, if you don't have a home, if you don't have money to go and buy water. You know? If you don't have the ability to go somewhere and cool down, you can die out here, man. In certain other places within the United States, it's cold. You know, it's still cold. You got to wear a jacket. You know? In certain places, parts of the globe, you can freeze to death, man. You know? If you don't have that, if you don't have a job, you don't have money. If you don't have, you know, if you're not working your ass off to get, you know, what you need in order to survive in that climate. You know? We ain't got no fucking rest here, man. But soon we will. Right? Soon we are going to have that rest. Right? Verse 53, it says, the root of evil is sealed up from you. Weakness and the moth is hid from you, and corruption is fled into hell to be forgotten. I mean, that shit's going to be put to death, man. We ain't gonna see that shit no more. Corruption? No. As a nation of people, we will no more be corrupted, right? We're not gonna be following after these wayward, these false gods, these wayward ass doctrines. We're not gonna be following the heathens, right? Because we see where that got us now, right? We're not gonna be doing that shit, man. We're not gonna be following these fucking devils, man. We're gonna be following Yahweh Bashim El Shah, and the heathens are gonna be following us. They're gonna want to be us. They're gonna look at us. Psalms 126. The heathen are gonna look at us and say, "Hey, the Lord have done great things for them." It's talking about the Israelites, so-called Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. Man, we're no longer gonna be on bottom. Soon we're gonna be on top, and the heathens are gonna be our slaves, man. You know. It says, verse 54. Sorrows are past, and the end is showed the treasure of immortality. Sorrows are past, man. We're going to be immortal. We're going to have rest. We're going to be on top. And we'll no longer ever have to deal with this bullshit that we're dealing with now, man. This devil being on fucking top, man. Fuck this devil, man. You know? It tells you right here, going back to Sirach, the 10th chapter. You know? I know I'm kind of all over the place, man. Salakia, man. Lord will has been edifying thus far. But this is Sirach 10 and verse 8. It says, because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another, from the Edomites to the Israelites, right? Let's go into that second Esdras, the 6th chapter. And I'll start at verse 7. Then answered I and said, what shall be the parting asunder of times? Or what shall be the end of the first and the beginning of it that followeth? Right? When you know, he's inquiring, when is going to be the end of this world and the beginning of what's coming next? Right? Our rulership, right? Verse 8, and he said unto me, from Abraham unto Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born, Esau was born of him, Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau, right? For Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth, right, man? Meaning we have next, man. We absolutely have next, right? We're, you know, again, right, we understand that this devil is in control, and we understand that he's, you know, pushing forth wickedness and evil in the earth. Right, and we understand that and it's vexing, right? It's very vexing to see this devil rule. It's very vexing to see this devil and how he's running things, even though, again, you have the Bible, right? The number one book, bought and produced book in his rulership, you know, but he's not using it, right? The scriptures talk about that this is the land of darkness, you know, and that's exactly what it is, man. You know, a land without order. This place is completely out of order, right? And it's not just here in America, but America is the epicenter of it. Epicenter of the problems we see in the earth, you know. We see that clear as day, man, you know. But we understand that this is not the end all be all, man. We understand that there is something that's coming next, and we're going to continue to hope and pray, right, that Yahweh Bashim El Shai, you know, speed this thing up, you know, and allow us to be a part of, you know, that number that gets delivered from this place, man, you know. 2/3 of our people here in America are not going to make it, man. They're not going to be able to see that because they want to be with this devil. They want to partake with this devil. They want to sit there and save this devil, man. The same one that is ultimately bringing you down, right? The same one that's ultimately, you know, calling you niggers, calling you spics, calling you wetbacks, calling you redskins, and pushing us on to concentration camps. You know, these reses, right? These reservations, you know, y'all want to be right along with this damn devil, man, and accept everything that he's giving you, right? But see, Yahweh Bashim El Shah hates that devil, and the Lord is going to bring this devil down, man, as we're seeing him do now, you know. And those who trust in Yahweh Bashim El Shah rather than trusting in man, those are the ones of the nation of Israel that are ultimately going to be delivered, man, and they're going to see that rest. They're going to be, you know, partakers, right, of the promise, right, being heirs to the promise with Yahweh Shai, you know, on the first go around, man, you know, which is what you should desire and should be fighting for, man. Fuck this world, fuck this place, you know. We want to get out of here, you know, as soon as possible, man, ASAP. And the only way to do that is to turn to Yahweh Bashim El Shah, man, you know. So that's all I got, man. Lord wills edifying. Lord will straight to the point. I want to give all praise, honor, glory to Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rachak Quadash. Again, double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone. Till next time, shalom.